Conspiracy: The Trial of the Chicago 8 is an enjoyable film, but if somebody were to argue that it's quite dry and a little slow, I could also see that. This was released in 1987. It's directed and written by Jeremy Kagen, and we have a cast including Peter Boyle, Robert Carradine, Elliott Gould. Great cast and performances. It's because of Peter Boyle that I became aware of this, but I probably would have watched it anyway because I love courtroom films. And all I'll say is if you don't care for courtroom films, you're not really going to enjoy this because the entire thing is in the courtroom, which I love. But it is quite slow. So if somebody were to say, actually, they needed something else in there or the pacing needed to be better, I can completely see that. It's quite long. It's about 2 hours. And I'll be honest, I don't think it needed to be 2 hours. But that being said, because it's based on truth, and I'll talk more about this in a moment, I feel like maybe it needed to be that long to include all of the important information. I'm by no means an expert on this, so I can't confirm if that's the case or not, but this was apparently actually based on the transcripts from the trial of the Chicago 8, later known as the Chicago 7. This was in the late 60s, and they were charged with conspiracy, and they were supposed to be turning this protest into riots, and charges concerning the anti-Vietnam War protests, and in general, as a topic, I find it really interesting, but certainly I'm not an expert, so if it's something you know a lot about, you're either going to really, really love this, or it might not be accurate that much and you might not care for it, but from my perspective, it was really informative. My knowledge of this basically came from the film The Trial of Chicago 7, which is a really great film. If you enjoyed that, if you liked the concept, definitely check this out, but this one is definitely a lot drier. As I said, it's taken from the transcripts, and the entire thing is basically the trial unfolding in the courtroom. The performances are brilliant. There is a lot of emotion. There is a lot of shouting at certain times. There are some very interesting characters. Again, I don't know how accurate they are to the true individuals, but certainly the performances were really interesting. Visually, it worked very well. I definitely felt like I was there. I felt like I was in the courtroom, and it's easy enough to follow with very little background knowledge, i.e. my position. Again, if you're an expert on this, you're either going to think it's really fascinating or you might not care for it very much. That being said, you might be in the middle. You might think that it's absolutely fine. But as a fan of courtroom films, I really enjoyed it. I found it to be very well executed, a little slow in places, but otherwise very well executed with some great performances and a lot of emotions, a lot of different emotions in this, and of course a lot of different perspectives. They also used some footage, archived footage from the time with some interviews and news footage, and that was all edited in really well. It felt occasionally a little jarring, pulling me out of it, but in general, it was edited really well, and I don't really have any complaints with this. I was keen to see what it was like. I didn't expect it to be entirely set in the courtroom, and I was pleased about that. I was really pleased. I thought it worked really well. But again, if somebody were to argue that they need something a little bit extra, I can definitely understand that perspective. Aside from being a little longer than it needed to be, I thought Conspiracy: The Trial of the Chicago 8 was a really fascinating experience. If you like courtroom films, I think you're going to absolutely love this. If the concept is interesting, definitely check out The Trial of the Chicago 7 as well. I've reviewed that a long time ago and I remember really enjoying that. So I'm quite happy with it, and if it sounds like a film for you, then I'd say Conspiracy: The Trial of the Chicago 8 is definitely worth watching.